Welcome to the Nursing Now podcast. My name is Janelle McSpiggin and I'll be your host. During this episode, we'll be talking about remote work and figuring out if it may be a right choice for you. So this is going to be a brief overview before we dive into the more specific avenues that you can take. I think remote work for nurses is a super foreign topic because we traditionally think about clinical aspects for nurses. So treating, administering medications, turning and enrolling our patients, monitoring treatment plans, calling doctors, monitoring labs, the more traditional aspects of rolling. So when we start to talk about using our licenses in a new and different way, a lot of people get confused. I know I certainly was when I figured out that I could use my nursing license to work remotely as a medical writer. And that's something that I've been doing for about 6 years now. So once I figured out that I could do that, it became a talking point for me because it's not well known. They never taught us this in nursing school. And I think it's really important for nurses to be reminded that we have different options besides just the clinical role. If you love clinical work, that's awesome, because our industry really promotes that type of work. But I find that not all nurses are built the same and that some have become disenfranchised with bedside work, particularly when our needs aren't met. So when we're working really long hours, when we aren't able to spend time with our families, when our ideas of what the bedside should be and what the bedside actually is don't match up, and specifically when we start to develop burnout. I find that nurses are looking for other options, but they want to use their nursing license because we've gone to school for this. We've built such an expertise out of this, and it's such a important aspect of so many of us, right? We're nurses, and nurses are always on. That's such a big part of us. We buy t-shirts that say RN. I've seen license plates that say RN and bumper stickers. I don't really see that for other fields. My husband's an engineer, and I've never really seen an engineer license plate or an engineer bumper sticker. So I think the nursing persona is really tied to us. So it's hard when we start to get burnt out and disenfranchised, and we question if this is the right role for us because that nursing concept is so deeply embedded in us, especially when nurses want to feel fulfilled and like we're helping people in our everyday life. So many of us have gone into it with this idea that nursing is a calling for so many of us. And we want our days to feel like we're making an actual impact, that we're not just cogs in the manufacturing machine, and that we're helping people, we're making a difference, we're really seeing how we can benefit the lives of our patients. So again, when we start to get burnt out, we don't want to say goodbye to our nursing license altogether, but we also need to look out for our own mental health. So we end up being at this crossroads of needing to do what's best for us because we are nurses, not martyrs, right? This is a career, and while it can be a calling for some of us, it doesn't mean that just because it's a calling that we should be emotionally or physically abused or taken advantage of with poor working conditions in the bedside community. So when we start to feel like that and we want to transition away, but at the same time, we have that pull back to the bedside because it's our calling, it's our career, it's our identity, what are we supposed to do? And I invite you to think about remote work in that scenario. That's how I was able to continue using my nursing license and still helping patients more so than I was at the bedside. I like to think that at the bedside, I can only touch one patient physically at a time. But with my writing work, I can have hundreds of people reading my articles all at the same time. I can work on the documents to get a medication approved by the FDA and change the lives of thousands of people. So I invite you to think about remote work not as leaving the bedside, but supplementing the bedside in a way that you couldn't possibly do as one person working clinically, while also helping your own life and your own mental health, and being able to support your family in a way that you might not have been as present before. So that's why we're introducing the topic of remote work, because it is so foreign, and I think it does get a little bit of a bad rap of you not being a real nurse. And I also invite you to take this idea of a real nurse and just throw it out of your brain. I think nursing and healthcare has a lot of taglines like, oh, I'm just a nurse, and they're a real nurse because they work with a higher acuity. They're in the ICU, or they're in the ER, or they work in a hospital and I don't, so they're a real nurse. If you're a nurse with an active license in your state, you're a nurse. It doesn't matter where you're working. It doesn't matter if you're physically touching patients, and it doesn't matter what the people around you think. It matters what your board of nursing thinks, and if you have an active license, that makes you a nurse. And I think that you don't have anything to prove to other people if it's at the detriment of your own mental health. So I invite you to really push back on those old-fashioned ways of thinking in healthcare, because they don't serve you. And if they're causing you mental strain and they're causing your family stress because you're not there to support them and you're missing big life events and you might be regretting your decision, why are we holding on to those taglines? And again, if this doesn't sound like you and you're happy as a clam at the bedside, I'm truly thrilled for you. I think that everyone should find their place in the world. And if the clinical role is for you, bravo. But like I said, I do think that it's important to think outside of the box, because everyone's brain is beautiful and different, and not everyone is built for their same type of work. So there are plenty of real nurses that have chosen to use their licenses as remote workers. And they continue to have active licenses in the same way that nurse managers have active licenses, and they haven't touched patients in years, some of them. We're talking about heads of departments. We're talking about nurse managers that spend all day doing administrative work or leading hospitals. These people also aren't touching patients, but they have active nursing licenses. Same thing with some nurse educators in universities. Some of them are required to stay at the bedside, but some of them aren't, and they're still nurses with valid licenses. So remote work isn't that much different from in-person work when they're not clinically touching a patient either. So it's actually not that foreign if we think about it. I also invite you to remember the definition from the ANA about the nursing scope. I'll read it off real quick. It's a little bit dry and a little bit boring, but I think it's really important to remember that it's not your coworkers that decide what a nursing is, or your family members that decide what a nursing is. It's the board of nursing and our regulatory body. So the ANA says nursing is the protection, promotion, and optimization of health and abilities, prevention of illness and injury, facilitation of healing, alleviation of suffering through the diagnosis and treatment of human response, and advocacy in the care of individuals, families, groups, communities, and populations. I just think that's a beautiful definition, and it's encompassing a lot of different aspects there. Advocacy for one, promotion of healing and prevention of illness and injury. Notice though how not once did it say the physical administration of medication, the touching of patients, nothing about being in person, and nothing against being remote. So we can optimize health, and we can promote for health for our patients, and we can protect our patients away from the bedside. Those are still things that we can do while using our nursing license. I think it's really important for us to always be circling back to that definition, especially when other people decide to voice their opinions. You can be well informed, and you can remind them of this definition, and that just because they have one dimensional definition of nursing does not mean that it's an accurate one dimensional definition of nursing, and that nursing encompasses a lot of different roles. Just because the most prominent role is clinical bedside doesn't mean that it's the only role. So nurses have a lot of options for using their medical or nursing license. You could be a medical writer, which is what I do. We're actually going to do an entire episode for medical writing, and we'll be doing many episodes for medical writing. So I'm not going to go too much into it right here. But basically, medical writing is researching, writing, and editing on health or medical topics for print or digital resources. You can work for a variety of different facilities for that. You could work for traditional hospitals. You can work for outpatient. You can work for a specific marketing agency that just does pharmaceuticals. You can work specifically for the pharmaceutical company, or you can work for a health blog. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. And like I said, it'll cover multiple episodes, so I won't go that far into it right here, but I'll just introduce the topic to you so you can start to warm up to the idea, because I'll be honest, I did not know about medical writing until someone told me. And the number one question I get asked about medical writing is, what is medical writing? Nurses also have the ability to be LNCs. That's a legal nurse consultant. If you've ever been interested in the legal aspects of nursing, as well as healthcare, this might be a great calling for you. If you ever dreamt of maybe being a lawyer or helping in a medical malpractice case, this is a great role for you. We will also be diving further into this, and we will have an expert LNC on the podcast. The legal nurse consultants use their nursing license to provide expert witnesses and background information to lawyers who don't have that medical knowledge so that they can understand their cases better. LNCs can help lawyers choose if they want to take on a case or if the case may not be worth it. And they can also do chart reviews to really dive deeper in a way that lawyers just don't understand. A theme that you'll hear over and over again is that nurses are field experts. And that's how we'll be leveraging our nursing license in these other facilities. So an LNC will be using their clinical knowledge to support a lawyer in that way. The next option for remote work is you could work for an insurance company in a variety of different roles there. You could be reviewing claims. You could be helping them develop insurance company plans. And we'll actually be having an entire episode for that with an expert for that as well. Health coaching is another popular way that you can use your nursing license. It's important to note that health coaches are not treating or diagnosing illnesses or ailments. We're simply following a treatment plan that's already been established. So if someone has diabetes, you might be helping them understand their complex diet that they might now have to follow, and you're just supporting them in an outpatient setting. You can also create fitness plans to help people. And overall, you're helping your client understand their disease process and using your field expert knowledge so that they can make more informed decisions. Health coaching is really interesting because it supports primary care in the bedside. A lot of the time, clinical roles don't have the outreach to really follow up with their patients time and time again to make sure that they're following the treatment plan and that they really understand. They're just following up with them with an appointment every 3 months, 6 months, something like that. So health coaches are really valuable because you're working with them weekly, you're checking in, you're motivating them, and you're using your nursing knowledge to make sure that they really feel supportive and that they understand their disease or ailment. So there are more options for remote nursing, and we'll be going a lot more into that. So I'm not going to keep going down the list. We're going to be having episodes dedicated to different ways that you can use your nursing license. Overall, we've seen a rise in remote work across the board in other industries. I think this really started after COVID. COVID really changed the landscape for nursing, healthcare, and careers in general. Other workers wanted the flexibility and the comfort to work from home, and nurses are no different. It's no secret that nurses want to see their families more, that we're sick of spending all of our time in the hospital, missing holidays, missing major events, and we want the freedom to also work remotely when we can. Because other industries are staying home, it's more acceptable than previously for us to work at home too. So we've seen a dramatic increase in nurses who are exploring alternative career paths and that want to find ways to support their family while also being present for their family. And an increase in technology is making remote work more attainable for so many people as well. With COVID brought a boom in technology to really support this, and it's been doubled down with AI as well. So there's no better time than right now to explore remote work because you really have not only a lot of options, these options are expanding, and the tools to support these options are really robust right now. There's a lot of pros and cons of remote work. We're going to start with the pros. I mean, the most obvious one is the flexibility and the remote work-life balance that you really get. You're not commuting into the hospital, you're not waking up at the crack of dawn to meet that 7 a.m. shift. You're not missing crazy life events. This is great for people that are trying to raise families, are starting their families, might be a little bit older and are transitioning into retirement. But I'll be honest, I don't have kids and I'm not retiring and I just wanted to work from home. So if you don't really have a reason, that's okay too. You really don't have one. Wanting to work remotely is valid enough. You also have a reduced commute time, so that means you spend more time with your family and more time at home too. So less time stressed out in a car and away from doing the things you love. There's more opportunity for specialized roles with the remote working. So because you're a field expert, you can leverage that information to get higher paying jobs than you might be if you were at the bedside. So when you're a medical writer or you're a legal nurse consultant, you're considered the field expert. You know your stuff like no one else does. So they're bringing you on as a consultant-based role. And they'll pay you for it. They'll pay you for it well. Remote workers also have a more relaxed day in general. We're not doing those crazy med passes. We're not running from one bedside to another. We're not limited on when we can take our breaks. We can nap when we want to. We can eat when we want to. I don't know about you, but when I was at the bedside, it was so rigid. I was put in this box of what I can and what I can't do. And I mean, it makes sense. We're saving lives and we're keeping people alive. But at the same time, I need to do what's best for me and my mental health. And that meant finding a more flexible, mellow job to support my mental and physical health. There are a couple of cons for remote work as well, especially if you're a really outgoing person. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit of a mix. I'm an introverted that does have extroverted moments. That's what I like to say. You do have reduced peer interactions. You're working by yourself and you don't have anyone next to you. You don't have coworkers, especially when you're working as an entrepreneur. So I've heard time and time again that nurses that have left the bedside do feel isolated. I don't think it's a problem with me because I have a very robust friend group. I have a very robust social life. I have tons of hobbies that keep me busy every single day. I'm leaving my house and doing stuff. But I do have friends that work remotely and they are hermits. They don't leave. They don't have hobbies. They just stay inside. And I think it compounds. So because they haven't left for the day, they don't want to leave for the next day. And suddenly driving 45 minutes is, crossing the Sahara Desert for them because they haven't done it for a while. So the more you stay remote, the more you kind of want to close off in your shell. So it is important that you do have to work to build those peer connections and to get outside and to stay busy. Another con is the potential for challenges in communication and tech challenges in general. I'll be honest, I'm not a tech gal. I never have been. I can do the remote work, no problem, but there have been times where it's challenging and I have no IT person to call. I have to figure it out by myself. So depending on what role you have and what your support level is in that role, it may be challenging for some people. I will say for medical writing, it's probably the least tech one. You pretty much just need a Google Docs, a Gmail, and a computer with internet, and you're good to go. But it is something to think about, the tech startup aspect of that. Another major con of remote working is the need for self-discipline and time management. When I was at the bedside, I had med passes that I had to do. I had alarms in my electronic health system. I had nurse managers. I had patients that would remind me of things. Lord knows there were a bunch of reminders built into my day. When you're working remotely, you don't have those reminders, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You are doing this all by yourself. So if you're not a self-motivating person, if you're someone that really drags their feet and procrastinates, this might be a difficult transition for you. I'll be honest, I'm a procrastinator too, so I am able to do it, but I have heard from other people that it was really difficult to be motivating for them. So that's another aspect to consider. When you're thinking about leaving the bedside, you need to really assess your readiness to figure out if this is a decision that you want. I will say that your bedside role is going nowhere. The nursing shortage has made it so that nurses are incredibly valuable, and that if your role isn't there for you, a million other roles similar to your job will be there. And if you're a good nurse, they will take you back 100%. So I always encourage nurses to take that leap to remote work or do it part-time and keep your foot in the bedside role. That way you can jump back if it's not for you. But there are some questions you can ask to assess your readiness. So what skills do you have? What type of person are you? I have no interest in legal nurse consultant, but I love to write and I've always been a writer. So medical writing was the obvious choice for me. So what might be the obvious choice for you? It really helps to brainstorm this over a couple of weeks, write it down, keep notes, that type of thing. Are you comfortable with technology and working by yourself and maybe fixing hiccups as they come? I know I wasn't, so I bought software that came with 24-hour support, so I could just email or call them when I was lost and confused. So there are ways to build in nets to help you, but it is something to think about. What type of remote work might interest you? What are you into? What do you think your day is going to look like? What lights that spark? Because the bedside was a calling for so many people and a large part of our lives. So what could be a good replacement for you? Can you see yourself staying home all the time? I'll be honest, I don't do well when I'm home all the time. So I do keep my foot in the clinical door because I like leaving the house. I like still touching patients and I like having coworkers, but I'll tell you, I was really, really unhappy when that was my only role and that was my main source of income. So I find my happiness when I'm primarily a medical writer that keeps their foot in the clinical door. When I reduced to just medical writing, I was just as unhappy as at the bedside. I was really antsy. I wanted to leave all the time. I felt like the world was passing me by and I was just spending more and more time at home. So I think it's important for you to self-reflect and figure out what type of person you are, if you're okay with that isolated feeling, or if you feel like you're going to be in like some sort of prison like I felt like I was, and if more of a hybrid role would be a better choice for you. Would you miss a predominantly bedside role? Are you someone who loves clinical care? Do you really, really love a good wound care? Some people are. That's not a reason not to try remote work because, like I said, you can still taper up and taper down and play with your schedule, but it's important to reflect on what type of nurse you are and what type of person you are before you make this jump and set up all the systems for it. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? This was huge for me. I got really overwhelmed when I thought of myself at the bedside for 15 years just running around. I thought, what would that do to my body? How would my back be? I had already thrown out my back 3 times. I couldn't walk sometimes. I couldn't ski. I couldn't do my hobbies outside because my career affected me. So not only was I burnt out during my job, I couldn't enjoy my life outside of my job. And I got really scared. I'm young. What would that look like in 10 years? What would that look like in 15 years? What type of damage would I be doing to my body? Could I even be that type of nurse in 15 years if, I was hurting myself like that now? What would those injuries look like? So that was a big wake up call for me to understand that I can't keep hurting myself, that myself and my body had to come first, and that I need to be the most important person in my life, not my patients, me. Because patient-centered care does not need to mean that nursing health gets thrown to the wayside, right? We are still important, we are still valid, and you need to take care of yourself too. So what does 10 years look like for you? Could you see yourself in a remote role? So I invite you to reflect on those prompts and see if remote working might even be a viable option for you. If you think it might be, stay tuned for the next couple of episodes. We'll be going over remote writing, how to transition, and other tips for you. In the episodes following, we'll be interviewing experts for the other fields I previously mentioned, so you can explore other paths besides medical writing, which is my expertise. If this is interesting to you, I have other resources on TikTok, Instagram. I'm very active on LinkedIn and I'm always posting there. And I also have a YouTube channel. You can find my course, workshops, and coaching for individualized support at willowbarkwriting.com. And I also have a free blog and newsletter on there too with tons of tips. I really believe in free resources for you guys. So just to recap, remote work is rising across all sectors, including healthcare. Nurses don't have to be left behind in this digital age. So if you're curious about it, there are tons of different aspects that you can really follow. We'll be exploring those aspects in the next coming episodes. Thank you for joining me, guys. Bye.